Hello and welcome to The Wire. My name is Zeeshan Kaskar. Today is the day when the Middle East woke up on the edge of something very, very dangerous. At around 3:30 a.m. Tehran time, Israel launched coordinated military strikes across Iranian territory, hitting what it called the heart of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. On your screen, you can see a map from Al Jazeera, where sites in Tehran, Natanz, Tabriz, Isfahan, and Arak were bombed. And this wasn't just about buildings. It was about people. Iran's top military commanders and nuclear scientists are dead. To discuss this problem and development, I have with me our founding editor, Siddharth Varadarajan, who understands international relations better than many in this country. Siddharth, thank you for joining in this live. But before I come to you, let me tell our viewers some details about what has happened. So, among those killed, as confirmed by Israeli and Iranian sources, are Hossein Salami, the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Mohammad Bagheri, chief of staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Ghulam Ali Rashid, I'm so sorry, head of the Khatam al-Anbiya command, six nuclear scientists, including Abbasi, who was the former head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, and Mohammad Mahdi Tehranchi, who was linked to Iran's weapons program. So, Siddharth, these are some of the top people and who are not like just general public. We have seen the attacks in Gaza. It's not like that. Israel has attacked military officials and people who are very close to the power center. So, what does that tell you?
Well, first of all, we should clarify that Tehranchi, Professor Tehranchi, is a nuclear scientist and is not linked to any nuclear weapons program because Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program, right? In the sense that the Israelis claim that they targeted him for that reason, but in reality, the Iranians have always denied this, and to date, no evidence has emerged of
So,
any
what
sort.
about the attacks that visuals that the Israeli claim that they have attacked the nuclear facilities?
No. The Israelis have. I'm saying that the Israelis have attacked Natanz. They've attacked, they've attacked nuclear scientists, the homes of nuclear scientists. They've attacked important military commanders, like you said, the army chief. And the Israeli official claim is that this is because of the threat posed by Iran's supposed nuclear weapons program.
Okay.
What I'm saying and what I'm trying to underline for our viewers is that this is an Israeli claim. It's a self-serving Israeli claim, actually. It's a claim that is unsubstantiated. It is a claim that there is no evidence for whatsoever, despite the intense scrutiny that Iran has been subjected to over the last literally 3 or 4 decades, including intensive inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency and sanctions and so on. The claim that Iran is making is that Israel is making is that Iran has a nuclear weapons program, and that in fact, when you listen to Netanyahu's explanation, which you can play for viewers, he says that they're on the verge. In other words, he presented the current moment as Iran being on some kind of turning point. That if we don't strike now, then Iran is going to. Maybe you can play that bite out for viewers.
Definitely. Let's just play what Netanyahu had to say after the attack.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Now, as Prime Minister, I've made it clear time and again Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal. Tonight, Israel backs those words with action. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program.
So as you can hear Netanyahu speak, he said that he attacked the nuclear facility. So what point were you making, Siddharth, about his statement?
I'm glad we played Netanyahu's statement in full, because I want viewers to understand, and then we will take apart all the sort of mistruths, half-truths, and blatant lies that Netanyahu has engaged in. But the fundamental point that we should start this discussion with, and everybody should be very clear about, is that in order to justify an unprovoked act of aggression against another country, which is what Israel has done by bombing Iran, Netanyahu is claiming that there was a clear and present danger from the Iranians towards Israel. He cites Iranian rhetoric in the past against Israel, says that this is genocidal rhetoric, says that Iran has enough uranium to develop nuclear weapons, and that Iran is on the verge of doing this, perhaps in as many as a few months. Right now, there is zero evidence
to suggest that he's saying.
He's saying this. There is zero evidence to back any of these claims that Netanyahu is making. For example, he talks about, with great confidence, about targeting people who are involved in the nuclear weapons program, and they are citing Professor Tehranchi as one of these people. The fact is that the Iranian nuclear program is entirely under the safeguards of the International Atomic Energy Agency. You have had extensive inspections over many, many decades. Nothing that even vaguely resembles what Netanyahu is saying has emerged. Right? Secondly, the uranium that he says Iran possesses, which is enough to make 9 nuclear bombs, this uranium is kept under IAEA safeguards. So it's not as if this uranium has been manufactured and secreted somewhere where Iran is assembling bombs. The IAEA knows where this is and has a full accounting of that. Third, he talks about Iran's genocidal rhetoric. Well, it's a bit rich coming from a prime minister who has been accused by the International Criminal Court of committing war crimes against the people of Gaza. You have the International Court of Justice, which has pretty much said that there is enough evidence to justify South Africa's concerns about Israel, perpetrating a genocide in Gaza. So you have a prime minister who is himself battling credible genocidal charges, and this genocide is unfolding every day. Now trying to deflect attention from what they're doing in Palestine, in Gaza, by targeting Iran in this way. And as I said, the arguments that he has cited, they simply don't add up. There is zero evidence of this. And I think this is a point that viewers need to clearly understand, that Israel is a country that has nuclear weapons.
Yes.
So Israeli weapons are not under any kind of international inspection, safeguards, nothing. Israel doesn't even own up to the fact officially that it has nuclear weapons, but it has nuclear weapons. The whole world knows this, and is now accusing Iran of doing something which there is zero evidence for. And what makes this attack and the timing of this attack especially, I would say, suspicious and also alarming in a way, is that the Trump administration had, when Donald Trump came back to power, when he assumed the presidency for the second time in January, there was a widespread assumption, given the kind of rhetoric he had engaged in, and given the fact that he had ended the agreement that was struck in 2015 with Iran, right? The JCPOA. He abrogated that. And the US walked out of it in 2018. So there was a feeling that Trump is going to favor. There was some talk of Trump favoring a military course of action against Iran. some of his appointments. Mike Waltz as NSA, for example, strong Iran hawks. But what's happened over the last 2 or 3 months is that Trump moved Waltz out. So Waltz is no longer the NSA. You had his head of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testifying before Congress that the US has no evidence that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. And the US is having negotiations with the Iranians for the revival of the 2015 agreement, and a round is supposed to take place in Oman in 2 days' time.
Okay, so it's very important to point this out here, because the next question is about the talks. And now that you have explained what these talks are about, that to going back to the 2015 deal, so these diplomatic talks were going on, and now that the position of US, I'm trying to question you about. Just I'm reading about Donald Trump saying that they're urging Iran to strike a deal before there is nothing left. And initially in the morning they said that we have nothing to do with the attack, but now it's like a pressure tactic to strong arm Iran into signing this deal. But there are other Iranian observers who also say that it's no longer possible after this attack. What do you feel about one, the US position, and the deal?
Well, it's a genuine, I would say, mystery or conundrum, because the US has gone on the record to say that it has nothing to do with this Israeli attack. But obviously, given geography, given the use of weapons, given the fact that in order to even attack Iran, which is far away from Israel, they would have to have used military assets that probably the US either allowed them to use or certainly was aware of. So the US is fully in the know of the attack, and you have an Israeli statement which says that we fully coordinated, or I forget the phrase they use, but yeah, I think they use the word coordinated. So the Americans have deniability that we didn't sanction this, and then there's a statement by Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, which is basically aimed at telling the Iranians that as and when you do retaliate against Israel, make sure you don't hit any American targets in the region, right? So there is some, so he's saying this either as a way of minimizing damage to US interests, or there is a genuine difference of opinion, because we know that the US has been urging Israel not to attack and that they want to pursue a negotiated settlement. Frankly, what is going on in Trump's mind, what's going on in the US establishment's mind, is a big mystery. But the fact is that the record shows US and Iran negotiating. And they were due to meet in 2 days. It's almost certain that as a result of this attack, right, that meeting will not take place. And even if it were to take place, if not now, a little bit later, it's very hard to imagine the Iranians softening up as a result of what Israel has done. So, so to that extent, I mean, so I would offer theory number one, which is that Israel was apprehensive of the US and Iran reaching a deal. And in order to scuttle or sabotage that deal, Netanyahu engaged in this reckless, adventurous attack on Iran. That's option number one. Option number two, the US never intended to reach a deal with Iran, was simply playing the Iranians, maybe letting them drop their guard a bit, in order to allow some breathing space for Israel to go and bomb their nuclear assets and in a way set the Iranian nuclear program back 6-7 years, so that even if Iran is not amenable to the kind of deal the US is proposing, Iran will not be in a position to enrich uranium or pursue any of the goals it says it wants to pursue for another 7 or 8 years, right? So that's option two. And it's option three is that the US is completely sincere about a dialogue, and that it's possible that Iran and the US may have reached an agreement. Well, this is a variation of option one, that essentially Israel is now openly defying
the US.
The US, which frankly, given the extent to which Israel is dependent on the US, that's also a little bit hard to imagine. So I would say it's it's very hard to read, but what we can say with some degree of certainty is that there was a wide gulf between the US position in the last meeting and Iran's position. The US took a view that Iran will not be allowed to enrich uranium at all. If you go back to the 2015 agreement that the US was party to, the Iranians were allowed to enrich, but the maximum level of enrichment was held to, I think, 3.5 or 3.7%,
Okay.
which is much less than what you need to make a bomb.
Okay.
So, the Iranians are trying to hold back to that position,
Hmm.
saying that, look, we reserve the right to enrich. You can't take away, our right to develop peaceful civilian technology. I want to underscore that the enrichment of uranium is what you would call dual use. You need enriched uranium as fuel to run to power a nuclear power reactor to produce electricity.
Okay.
If you enrich uranium to a much higher degree, to 90% and above, you can create the raw material for making a nuclear bomb. And the IAEA steps in. Many countries enrich. India enriches. India is, of course, not a party to the NPT, but you have many countries who are signatories to the NPT that have the capability to enrich uranium. Japan, for example.
Okay.
But the IAEA regulates this enrichment, and the Iranians are saying, look, let the IAEA continue to regulate whatever we do, and as long as they come back and say everything is accounted for, then why should we be subjected to any kind of penalty or any kind of restriction? So that's where the Iranian position stands. But I think that, to come back to your question, as a result of what Israel has done, it seems highly unlikely that the Iranians are going to soften up and accept whatever terms Trump is proposing, unless this attack and Iran's, we don't know how the Iranian response is going to play out, unless this attack unleashes domestic dynamics in Iran. This is a possibility that can't be ruled out, but I would say it's, as of today, looking a little bit unlikely. But which then forces the Tehran authorities to change their whole approach. But that's looking a bit unlikely right now. As of now, I don't see dialogue happening between the US and Iran.
Okay. Just an add-on question to this about what do you feel would have happened, because it's very interesting that you point out the timing. 2 days later, there was another negotiation going to happen between US and Iran. So what would have happened had this negotiation taken place, and what would happen now?
Yeah. So we don't know, frankly, because in fact, there's another, the attack, the Israeli attack also is linked by way of timing to a resolution that the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors passed 2 days ago, which essentially held Iran guilty of, or it accused Iran of failing to comply with the IAEA. And this is the first negative vote against Iran in the Board of Governors at the IAEA in around 20 years. And essentially what the Board of Governors accuses the Iranians of failing to do is explaining to the Atomic Energy Agency the presence of trace elements of uranium or nuclear material that the IAEA found at about 10 or 15 different locations around Iran. Now, just to explain to viewers, the earlier set of accusations that the IAEA had against Iran, going back to 2005, 2006, 2007, was that the agency had detected nuclear material in places that it should not have been. In other words, it raised the possibility that Iran had undeclared or unsafeguarded nuclear facilities. And if they did that, obviously that's a threat, because if you have undeclared facilities, chances are that you have these facilities not for peaceful reasons, but for weapons reasons, right? So the Iranians were then subjected to a series of inspections and pressure. And by the time the JCPOA agreement was struck in 2015, I would say most of the virtually all the questions that the IAEA had about the presence of undeclared nuclear material at Iranian sites was cleared up, right? And then you had the agreement, which then ran for 3 or 4 years, much to the consternation of Netanyahu, who was Israeli Prime Minister, and the Israeli regime in general, because for them, they never accepted the possibility that you could have a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear question, right? So for them, it was all or nothing. That you cannot allow the Iranians to have any kind of nuclear enterprise, that it would be fraught with danger. So the Israelis had been against the JCPOA from day one, and in 2019, they claim to have supplied intelligence to the IAEA
Okay.
or they claim to have obtained intelligence about the presence of trace nuclear material in 14 or 15 other sites.
Okay.
These are sites completely unrelated to known Iranian nuclear activity.
Okay.
And when the Atomic Energy Agency inspectors visited those sites, and we're talking of pretty large places, they were able to pinpoint specific locations that by testing a sample at that particular corner, they said, oh, look, we found a little bit of trace elements of polonium, trace elements of uranium.
Okay.
And the Iranian explanation was that, look, these sites have nothing to do with our nuclear program at all. Clearly, the Israelis, in an attempt to sabotage or undermine Iran's relations with the IAEA,
Okay.
have managed to plant trace material in different locations and then given those precise coordinates to the IAEA so that the IAEA inspectors would come and find those. And if we go with the Iranian explanation that these were planted material, then clearly the Iranians can never come up with an explanation that is going to satisfy the IAEA, which is why the Board of Governors, voted to find them not in compliance. But if we accept the logic of what the IAEA or the Board of Governors are saying, you have the presence of this material. Of course, having the presence of material essentially, I mean, the worst case scenario is that, I mean, assuming the Iranians are lying, right? The worst case scenario is that Iran has hidden away somewhere secret and advanced nuclear facilities that the world does not know of. And if that is the case, that may explain the presence of, but why would you have material in these 15 different places? And it's not as if when having searched those areas, it's not as if the inspectors found other incriminating equipment or material, right? So there is some merit in the Iranian claim that these samples were planted. Who knows? We don't know. But to come back to your question, what would have happened? Frankly, we don't know. After the last meeting, which I think was in Rome, there was an impasse. The two sides, in fact, exchanged harsh words because the US wanted Iran to abandon enrichment completely. The Iranians said that we are never going to do that. There was some possibility that the process would have strung on further, but I don't see the US conceding on that point, and I don't see the Iranians conceding on that point either. So there would have been an impasse of some kind in all likelihood.
Okay, thank you for stating so many detailed facts about the uranium and findings, and from both sides, in fact. But I just want to ask you about how Iran could respond. The first 100 drones which were strike down by Israel is there, but other than that, what could be the next response, and how are Israelis able to defend that?
So we've in a way been down this road before, right? When this is not the first aerial attack that Israel has launched on Iranian territory, and each time, of course, it's the largest and the deadliest. But each time the Iranians have said, we will hit back, we will take revenge, and so on. And their response has, in military terms, been somewhat underwhelming. Their ability to penetrate Israel's formidable air defenses is questionable. The Israelis recently restocked on the Golden Dome anti-missile system. So frankly, we don't know. But what is certain is that given the fact that the prestige of the Iranian government, Iranian regime is at stake, given that the regime has staked its entire, diplomatic, strategic policy over the last 20 years on this fundamental principle of insisting that Iran wants to pursue a peaceful civil nuclear energy program, including enrichment, it seems hard to imagine that the Iranians will not throw everything they have at Israel, right? So the Israelis are bracing for an attack, and it's likely, given the scale of what the Iranians are going to respond with, that some of what Iran is going to throw, maybe a lot of it, is going to reach its targets in Israel. We don't know what will happen, but what is certain is that the Americans, who claim they had no role to play in the attack, and who are kind of will certainly play a full role in defending Israel when the Iranian attacks do come, right? So I think that Iran will be fighting really quite an uphill battle. Israel today is militarily a strong power, major power. It's registered major victories against Hezbollah. Of course, it's been unable to defeat Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It's been pursuing this horrible genocidal war now for a year and a half. More than 50,000-60,000 people have been killed by the Israelis. But yet the Israeli war machine continues. And I want to underline another point for viewers, that this act of bombing Iran is not just, of course, it's illegal in international law, in my view. It is dangerous because it's going to trigger a response that could open the path for a wider conflict. But it is also a highly cynical move, because for a leader like Netanyahu, who is facing corruption charges at home, whose war of genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza is now finally evoking criticism from within Israel too. This is the last throw of dice by a leader who knows that unless he fuels more conflict and war, his days in office are likely to be numbered, right? So you have cynical, use of war by an utterly discredited leader who is desperate to stay onto power, because he knows that if war does not prevail, the judicial process against him has to continue, and the support that he does not have among the electorate in Israel will eventually lead to his being kicked out of power.
That's just my last question, SV. After the October attacks, the world opinion, so to say, was with Israel and Netanyahu, but it has completely changed now. And with this attack, you see the reactions from world leaders. There's a somewhat a balance they're trying to strike. Even India said both sides should just restrain from attack. How do you look at the global reaction to these attacks, and two, what happens to the war in Gaza then, or the genocide?
Well, the war, the genocide in Gaza is going to continue. There's no signs at all that Israel is letting that abate, because the kind of assets that it is using, military assets it's using against defenseless people, is not. This is not anything that's going to come in the way of its war against Iran, and the international reaction, the world. I still don't see many countries willing to cut their ties or to speak honestly and bluntly about what Israel has done. Even the Indian statement, in my view, is a travesty, because you have a clear and irresponsible act of aggression by Israel against Iran. You have several million Indians who live in the Gulf region who could be affected by a wider war. You have Israel targeting nuclear facilities, so there was a danger of radioactive, debris, which fortunately has not happened. But they bombed Natanz, they bombed a couple of other places. So far, the IAEA says there's been no radioactivity. So I think, given the irresponsible, illegal way in which Israel has acted, one would have hoped for a stronger response from the government of India. But then the government of India under Modi has been singing a different tune for the last 10 years on all of these fundamental questions of Indian foreign policy.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for joining in this conversation. And what we can just say, it's whatever is happening in the Middle East, it's like a tricky situation right now, and it's a dangerous situation, as also stated by European leaders. So thank you so much, Siddharth, for joining. And for the viewers, let me tell you that it's the attack on Iran is unprecedented. First, a nuclear enrichment site, Natanz, was bombed, while Iran says radiation levels are under control. The IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, is now on high alert. Second, this isn't an assassination of a rogue general abroad. This is an open declaration that senior Iranian leaders are now direct targets, including scientists and professors. Third, the US is trying to play it both ways, saying it wasn't involved while still declaring its support for Israel security. That's it from me. My name is Zeeshan Kaskar, and you were watching The Wire.
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।